We are wrapping up our 5 love languages series today, and there are a few foundational things we've been covering each week to make sure we're all on the same page. Number one, we all have a primary emotional love language. Our good friend Dr. Chapman identified 5 of them: words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. Those 5 ways, you'll have one of them or 2 of them that kind of climb to the top of when that happens to you. You just feel loved. Someone affirms you and says some positive things. You're like, yeah, you just feel loved about that, or gives you a little gift, or a physical touch thing. Those are the 5 things. You'll identify at least one of those, probably a couple of them. All of them you'll identify in some level with. Number 2, we all have love tanks. Our love tank gauges how loved we feel. And number 3, a full tank leads to a healthy relationship. And the goal of this series is to help you, if you've not done this before, identify your love language, or the love language, and really the love language of your spouse, and for you to keep each other's love tanks full. But it applies to other areas of life: your children, your co-workers and friends. Just if you want to keep a good, healthy relationship, much of this applies. So, physical touch is what we're talking about today. And it just seems like you may have talked about this. I talk about this in different contexts with different people at different times. We've talked about it on a radio show on Mondays a few times, and it seems like immediately the thought goes towards the sexual intimacy part of marriage. And that may be, it is included in this, but that's not like the big thing in this. It's just physical touch. When someone touches you, they're touching you, right? I mean, they're touching into your soul, into your body. It could be just holding hands, whether you're driving down the road holding hands, or sitting next to each other in church holding hands. It could be a small hug before walking out the door to go to work, or a little peck on the cheek or something. It could be snuggling on the couch. It could be a back rub when you're sitting there in the kitchen, frying eggs, or whatever it is. I mean, it's any type of touch that you receive. It fills your tank. When it's a positive type of touch, it tells you that you are loved, that you are respected, that you are honored as a person. We touch people all the time. You probably have shaken a few hands today, maybe. And if the person whose hand you shook has the love language of physical touch, you could have said good morning, and that would have been nice. You could have given them a nice donut or something, and that would have been nice. But what really said, wow, they're glad I'm here, is you shook their hand. Someone shook your hand, and you're like, oh, I just love going to church because I shake a lot of hands, because that just kind of fills your tank in your church relationship. So you touch people all the time. It's normal. On the flip side, if someone extends a hand and they pull back, what are they saying to you? I'm angry at you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to be engaged in a conversation with you. I had a guy years ago, 20 years ago or something, who was so mad at me. I would say, hey, how you doing? And I would reach my hand out, and he would just look at it and walk away. Okay? And I may have pushed this button a few times, and I thought, he's not going to shake my hand, So I probably shouldn't have done that. But I spoke obviously, it was screaming, I'm mad at you right now. I don't like you as a human being. And it's a physical touch thing. His love language was probably physical touch. So he was obviously trying to communicate in the way that he knew best. So that's just what happens. When I visit a church for the first time and nobody shakes my hand, that communicates to me, it's probably not that important to people that I'm here. They don't really care if I come back or not. A few people shake, it doesn't have to be many. 3, 4 people shake my hand. I'm like, hey, that was a friendly place. It's just weird. It's a physical touch time in a very social and appropriate kind of way. So it's important for us to greet people we don't know with a simple handshake and a good morning, because it just communicates volumes to people, especially if that's their love language, physical touch. All right, here's some hints. We try to do each week, talking a little bit about the language and just giving a few simple hints. If the person you are married to has this is a love language, or other key people in your life, they have this is a love language, here are some hints for you. Number 1, touch them often. It's amazing how many times the Bible refers to people praying and laying hands on someone. If you ever notice that, it's like all over the place, over and over, and they laid hands on them and prayed. And I thought, well, why? Why? Is there something magical, you know? Do they have like magic prayer gloves or something? I mean why? Why? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I've asked that myself. I've sat in some really smart theologians' classes who were like, I don't know, there's something about the human touch and a spiritual connection, and God just had them lay hands on people and pray. And so we'll do that sometimes if there's especially something big going on, and we'll just kind of lay hands and pray, and there's some spiritual connection. There's a physical touch. So it's going beyond the physical and into a spiritual level, and it's an appropriate type of way. The Bible says multiple times to greet one another with a holy kiss. We have four verses on the screen. In each of those verses, the Greek word describes a kiss that is physically sacred and pure, morally blameless. So it's not creepy. You know, it's not like your excuse to say, well, God said to kiss you, you know, and run him down, chase him down the hall. That's not what this is. It's an appropriate, friendly, holy embrace. Now, we've replaced that pretty much with the handshake in our culture because you go around giving people holy kisses, you might get something back that's not as pleasant, a fist to the mouth or something, you know, a push or something. I mean, so don't run around kissing people and say, well, the Bible said to. It's a friendly greeting type of physical touch. So physical touch does cross the barrier into marital intimacy, right? I mean, and it's also emphasized in that if that is your love language, this speaks more to you than just the hormones, because the hormones are flying too in people. But if you have this is a love language, it's a bigger deal to you than just normal self. So I want to look at what the scripture says about issues of intimacy because, well, it's important in this. 1 Corinthians 7, Paul says, now for matters you wrote about, it's good for a man not to marry. The literal meaning of the word there means to have sexual relations with a woman. So he's, as a single guy, saying, you know what, it's best that you all just don't be doing that. Because he's going through the filter of a single guy. He says, however, I know you're not going to listen to this. All right, so let me give you some instruction. But since there's so much immorality, each man should have his own wife. Right? If you have to be doing this, then get married. Okay? Each man should have his own wife. Each woman her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to her husband. In the same way, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. Do not deprive each other except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. There's a spiritual element there. We're like fasting this area of our life. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Small breakdown of the text. The word duty in verse 3 refers to something that's owed. In this case, on the married, a position. Because I am your husband, I owe you this. Because I'm your wife, I owe you this. It's part of our marital relationship. It's a duty, as is translated in this version. To be sexually involved with each other is owed to one another as a married couple. The word deprive in verse 5 is the idea of robbing or stealing something that's not theirs to take. So I owe it to you, and if I hold it back from you, I'm stealing from you. That's what he's saying in these two verses here, verse 3 and verse 5. Don't steal. He's saying don't hold back what's owed your spouse, because it's not yours to keep. It's theirs. He says don't deprive each other of this expression of love unless you both are agreeing to it. So you've had a conversation. It's not just, well, I'm mad at you, so therefore, or I don't think I like you today, so I'm going to keep that back. It's a mutual conversation that you both agree to. And then if you are holding back from each other, do it for just a time. He doesn't define how long that time is. That's up to you as a couple to have a conversation, again, an adult conversation, a calm conversation. Well, how about we do this for this long? How about we not do that for that long? And you have a conversation about it. Now, I can tell you this much. If one of you has, all the hormone stuff aside, if one of you has the love language of physical touch and the other one doesn't, you have to be careful in this conversation because one person has a stronger motivation than the other. So you have to really delicately have the conversation. It is truly an adult conversation where you have to keep the other person in mind. It's not all about you. Matter of fact, in marriage, it's about the other person. And that's usually where the difficulty happens. You got to keep their love language in mind. It gets more tricky when you add hormones and stuff on top of the mix, but I've seen many times when one person is feeling unfulfilled in this part of their marriage, they start looking other places to have that need, that desire satisfied, and that's what Paul's talking about when he talks about this temptation and avoiding the temptation. So just do it for a time that you have agreed upon for a spiritual reason. You're praying, and it's a fast, basically, and then you come back together. Now, here's the thing about the physical touch, and it's true with all the love languages. You can tell someone whose love language is physical touch every day that you love them. You can compliment them all day long. You can serve them the acts of service regularly. You can do all the other 4 love languages to them. If you're not fulfilling this area, they're not receiving "I love you." And they're feeling unfulfilled, and they're feeling very empty, and it will lead to trouble in the marriage. So talk about it, have conversations. The Bible doesn't give you an authoritative, this is how, you have to have that conversation as a couple, and this gives you an element of conversation as well. If this is how you scored in the book as far as a love language. All right, number 2, touch only your spouse. Now, in the marital way, right? This should be obvious. Some of you chuckled, but it's not anymore because people go across the boundaries all the time, and it's insane. It's the culture we live in. Listen to a wise father's instruction about sexuality. Now, see, I even made it sound like these days. Obviously, it was happening all throughout human history, or someone back in Proverbs wouldn't have been writing about it to them, to that culture as well. Proverbs 5, drink water from your own cistern. This is metaphorically speaking, only be involved with your spouse. Drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow into the streets, your streams of water in public squares, let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed. May you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be captivated by her love. Why be captivated, my son, by an adulteress? Why embrace the bosom of another man's wife? Keep your eyes on your own spouse. Keep your hands on your own spouse. Never let yourself go to your neighbor, your coworker, computer screen, whatever, or anywhere else. Keep them on your spouse. Now, affairs are devastating to a marriage. It is multiplied if the victim in the marriage has the love language, physical touch. Because not only are you not touching them, you're touching someone else. The ultimate rejection. That is extra challenging to overcome in a marriage. Keep your eyes and your hands on your own spouse. God's plan is not that complicated. If you're married, keep with your spouse. If you're not married, wait until you're married. I mean, it's really simple. The Bible's pretty simple, all right? Anything else leads to all kinds of complication. God's not trying to cheat you. He's just trying to help you avoid all these complications in life that really aren't necessary. Number 3, timing is everything. This is when it comes to the touching, all right? You can inappropriately, awkwardly touch people at the wrong times, and you can appropriately, encouragingly touch people at the right times. I did a funeral, a long time ago, of a biker who was very well known in the state of Iowa. He led a state organization, and I've told you about this before. There were like 1,000 bikers that came into town for this funeral. The whole town was rumbling with Harley, and it was a crazy thing. And these guys are rough, gruff, tough. Who knows if the night before they weren't, battling each other in fist fights. And I mean, it was just that type of crowd. But you know what? That day, I've never seen so many manly embraces in my life. I mean, they were hugging each other. I mean, and they did it with gusto. They weren't like, hey, man. I mean, they were like, pound, pound. You could hear leather getting beaten all over the place. They were coming up and hugging me and picking me up, and I'm like, oh, I mean, any other context, that would have been really weird. I mean, some dude in his full leather thing with a bright leather hat. I mean, there were some tall hats with color. I mean, it was crazy. Came up and would pick me up at the mall and swing me around. I'd be like, this is weird. We got a problem. But in that context, it was the timing was right. It was okay. So timing is everything when it comes to physical touch. You know what? Sometimes it's okay to shake someone's hand. Sometimes it's not. You got to read the situation. You got to engage your mind in this. If you're a man and a woman initiates a hug, well, be careful how you hug, but go ahead and hug the person. But you don't necessarily need to be running around hugging women and initiating those hugs, because especially in today's culture, it's just kind of like, hey, what are you trying to do there? So just be careful with that. It's inappropriate to go down to the beach and go around hugging people. I mean, it's like timing. You use your mind. Timing is everything. Number 4, positively touch your children. I think this is important. I really do. Positively touch your children. This is a little off the marriage topic, but if there's physical touch happening later, there's probably going to be children coming, right? So maybe it's in context, right? Jesus understood the power of positive touch. He was touching people all the time. He touched them in healing. He touched sick people. He touched lepers. He touched disciples. He laid hands on people. He touched children. Matthew 19:14, Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them. The kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." And when he placed his hands on them, he went on from there. That's that placing hands on the thing. It was a spiritual thing. He was doing some type of blessing, some type of prayer. It was a positive touch. So positive, there were probably parents lining up to have Jesus bless their children. I mean, it was a very positive thing. When I was a little guy, little guy, man, I got a lot of positive touches from my mom. Hugs. I just remember always hugging my mom. I was a mama's boy, and I don't think a night went by that she didn't give me a little kiss goodnight, a little sweet little, oh, good night, Dan, oh, good night, Mommy. I loved hanging out on the couch and snuggling with Mom and watching TV. These were all just positive, warm, embracing type of touches. I felt very secure, very, very loved as a child growing up in our home. Total opposite with my dad. Part of that's probably a generational thing. His generation didn't really do a lot of hugging. So I don't remember once receiving a hug ever in my life from my dad. Just didn't. I don't remember any, pat on the back, pat on the head, whatever a dad would do, to a son. I just don't remember any touches at all growing up with my dad. I remember only a couple instances. One, he touched me with a razor strap because he was mad and he was chasing after me, and he really kind of missed. But it looked like he hit me, so he'd stop. I can't remember. It must have been bad. Whatever I did, I must have really made him mad. And because that wasn't like a normal situation, it was just a threat. And then other examples I remember are we'd be in the front yard playing catch with a baseball, and I don't know how long it would take, but he'd get bored and start throwing it really super hard because he knew I wasn't, I was kind of learning, and he'd wait until it hit me in the face, and I'd start bleeding, and he'd laugh, oh, you loser wimp, and then he'd run off, and I'd run off to my mom, and that's the only physical touches I really remember from Dad growing up. You think it'd maybe make me a better athlete or something? He just made me hate baseball. So I still, at baseball, I'm like, I turn the channel, just don't care. Here's the thing, though. Toward the end of his life, when our relationship became actually pretty healthy, we're both adults, and I'm in my, must have been late 20s, and when he passed away. And in that time frame, I still never hugged or anything, but we graduated to the handshake, which was kind of a big deal. I don't know what your relationship with your dad is, because we'd be getting ready to go, and we'd have that awkward moment, and we'd kind of be looking at each other I don't know what to do. And he's like, yeah. I mean, we never said it, but it was just that, the look, the eye, the body language is like, we both feel like we should be doing something, but we didn't know what to do. So one of us would finally go, hey, we'd shake the hands and run off. That's my extent of physical touch that I received from my dad. Now all these years later, I'm a different guy than I was then. I've more comfortable in my own skin, whatever, the whole stuff. I'd be okay just grabbing my dad and hugging him. I wish that would have happened, but I never did. And he didn't either. It's just what it was. Positively touch your children. Here's the deal. If you're not positively touching your children, especially if this is their love language that's developing as children, they will find it somewhere. And the people who would be glad to help them with that may have more nefarious intentions than you. You're just loving your child, and you're being positive, and you're building them up. They might have a whole different plan. So fulfill that with your children in the home in a positive, godly, pure kind of way. This is like all the other love languages. A positive touch communicates positive things. A negative touch can be emotionally devastating. People who have gone through abuse, it is much harder for them to climb through the murk of that, to get to forgiveness, because they've been hurt at a deeper level than someone who doesn't have this as a love language. So you have to be careful with that. But love your kids, love your spouse, touch them physically in positive, godly ways, and it will help build them up. Especially those kids, man, they're going to grow up and be gone before you know it. They just will, and you have to be careful with that. Okay, assignments for the week on your physical touch. Hold hands. I say when you're out in public, it doesn't matter where. But I don't know, public just kind of speaks a little louder, like, hey, look, hey, they're touching me, woohoo, So hold hands. Do something where you're holding hands. Hold hands right now if you're sitting next to them. Number 2, give 5-minute back rub every day. Doesn't have to be big. Could be, like I said, maybe they're washing dishes. I don't know, whatever. Give them a little back rub. And make sure you get some hugs in there every day. Again, could be when they're walking out the door. Hey, a little hug. I'm going to bed early. See you later. Give them a hug. Just engage physically. And yeah, that's your assignment. Let's pray.